Welcome to Old World Mastery. There is something fundamentally wrong with the way we build today. In 1872, engineers inspected the Borgund Stave Church, a wooden building in the Norwegian mountains that had already been standing for almost 700 years. Outside, in one of the harshest winters in decades, the temperature was -31 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow was several feet deep. Wind roared through the valley hard enough to shred a modern expedition tent. Inside that church, with no heating system, no fiberglass insulation, no double-pane glass, the air stayed at a steady 46 degrees Fahrenheit. No fire was burning, no electricity. The building itself held the heat. Now compare that to a modern American single-family home. Turn off the heat at 14 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Within about 6 hours, the indoor temperature can drop below freezing. Pipes burst by hour 12. After 24 hours, the house is uninhabitable. How did builders 8 centuries ago create a wooden building that outperforms many homes today? Welcome to Old World Mastery, where we resurrect the building methods, tools, and physics our ancestors used to survive brutal climates without fossil fuels or the electrical grid. In this episode, we're going to break down the 3 hidden principles that made medieval Scandinavian log buildings so warm and resilient: thermal mass, near-perfect airtightness, a heat strategy based on storage, not constant burning, a modern scientific experiment that put a medieval cabin head-to-head with a code-compliant prefab house, what modern engineers routinely ignore, and how you can use these old principles in a new build or renovation today. By the end, you'll see why many houses today are essentially on life support and how to design a home that can stay livable for days, even if the power disappears. Before we dive deeper, leave a comment. Have you ever gone through a winter blackout or a gas cutoff? How long did your home stay comfortable without heat? 30 minutes, a few hours, or more than a day? Share your experience below. We'll pin one detailed story to the top for others to learn from. 3. Old cabin versus new house, the experiment that should have changed everything. Let's rewind to 2010. Researchers at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology built 2 test buildings, each about 430 square feet. Building A, a reconstructed 14th century log cabin. Solid logs, roughly 12 inches in diameter, hand-hewn, joined with tongue and groove. No fiberglass, no plastic vapor barrier, no modern insulation. Building B, a modern prefab house built to strict contemporary energy standards. Double layers of insulation, wall R value around 25, vapor barriers, triple glazed windows. On paper, the modern house looked vastly more efficient, higher R value, high-tech materials, carefully calculated assemblies. Both buildings were placed in the same cold valley, with an outside temperature around -8 degrees Fahrenheit, -22 degrees Celsius. Engineers heated them to a comfortable 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius, and then cut the power. Here's what happened. The modern prefab plummeted to 36 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 degrees Celsius in about 9 hours. The log cabin? After 48 hours, its interior was still 54 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 degrees Celsius. After 72 hours, 3 full days with no heat, it was about 43 degrees Fahrenheit, 6 degrees Celsius, above freezing and survivable. The building that looked best on paper became a life-threatening icebox. The primitive-looking log cabin stayed habitable. Why? Most modern engineers will immediately say, that makes no sense. The log cabin's wall R value is maybe 10. The modern wall is R25. Higher R value should win. And that's where the first big lie of modern construction shows up. R value only describes steady-state heat flow through a material. It says almost nothing about how much heat that material can store. That missing element is called thermal mass, and it changes everything. 4. Thermal mass, turning your house into a heat battery. A 12-inch thick wall made of old-growth pine is heavy, roughly 80 pounds of wood per linear foot of wall. Wood also has a relatively high specific heat capacity, which means it can store a lot of energy for every degree of temperature change. When you heat a log cabin, your warm air doesn't just heat your skin, it soaks into the entire thickness of the log wall, deep into the core. The wall becomes a thermal battery. When the fire goes out or the electric heater stops running, that charged battery slowly releases its stored heat back into the room over many hours or even days. The air cools, but the structure is constantly feeding warmth back in. Now compare that to a modern American single-family home. Turn off the heat at 14 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Within about 6 hours, the indoor temperature can drop below freezing. Pipes burst by hour 12. After 24 hours, the house is uninhabitable. Medieval builders didn't do math on this. They learned through brutal trial and error. They chose old-growth trees, often 80 to 100 years old, growing painfully slowly in northern climates. Tight growth rings, sometimes dozens per inch, created extremely dense wood. Approximate numbers: 1 cubic foot of old-growth pine is roughly 37 pounds. 1 cubic foot of fast-grown plantation pine is roughly 28 pounds. That density matters. More mass equals more storage. More storage equals a longer thermal lag. It can take 12 to 18 hours for a strong cold front to work its way through a 12-inch dense log wall. By the time the cold really arrives at the inner surface, you've already made your next fire. The cabin doesn't fight the cold hour by hour, it smooths out the violent swings. If you had to choose between a light, highly insulated house that cools down in a few hours or a heavier, solid wood house that cools slowly but uses less energy over time, which would you pick for a winter power outage? Type light or heavy in the comments and tell us why. Your reasoning might help someone planning their next home. 5. Invisible 20 by 20 inch hole. Thermal mass alone won't save you if outside air is constantly leaking in. Despite all our modern membranes and tapes, the average new home leaks a shocking amount of air. Blower door tests, where a fan pressurizes the house and measures leaks, often show that the total air leakage of a typical home is equivalent to a 20 by 20 inch open window. Not one obvious hole, but thousands of tiny ones, around outlet boxes, along baseboards and window frames, through gaps in framing, poorly sealed penetrations, and sloppy joints. If it's 5 degrees Fahrenheit outside, that invisible window is bleeding heat 24/7. Your expensive furnace is not fighting the walls, it's fighting that permanent hidden opening. Medieval log cabins attacked this problem in a completely different way. Scribe-fit joinery. Each log was carefully scribed to match the shape of the one below it. Carpenters laid one log on top of another, used compasses and chalk to mark the exact contour, then cut the underside of the new log so it nested perfectly. It was slow, a single room could take months, but the result was a wall where each log locked into the next with almost no air gap. Natural chinking. Any remaining cracks were filled using a layered, natural system. Sphagnum moss from nearby bogs was packed into the joints. This moss can hold many times its own weight in water. Dried and compressed, it springs into every tiny crevice and stays there. Over the moss, builders applied a daub of clay mixed with animal hair, often sheep or goat. The clay dried into a hard shell. The hair acted like rebar, preventing cracking as the wall moved. This created a wall that was essentially airtight to drafts, but still vapor open, meaning moisture could migrate slowly through and dry out, instead of being trapped. Modern researchers have measured airtightness in some of these 500 to 600-year-old cabins. Many of them meet on par or exceed today's passive house airtightness standards. Think about that. A hut cut with axes and stuffed with moss leaks less than a new brand suburban house wrapped in plastic and synthetic membranes. 6. Principle. Heat strategy. Store, not drip. The third piece of the puzzle is how heat is actually produced and used. When we imagine an old cabin, we picture a big open fireplace. Romantic, but totally wrong for an efficient winter house. Open fireplaces are thermal disasters. They suck huge amounts of warm room air, send it straight up the chimney. It can even create negative pressure that drags cold air in through every crack. A bright, roaring fire in an open hearth can literally make the rest of the house colder. Scandinavians solved this with masonry heaters, massive stoves built from brick, tile, or soapstone. Locally, they had names like kakelun or soapstone stove. How they work? You burn a very hot, very fast fire once or twice a day.